Let's setting up meeting. I don't know why. If we are live and people can hear us, hi. If not,
I see us on Facebook right now.
Okay, good, excellent. Okay. So hi everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Tea with Natalie and a special crossover episode with Coffee with Christa. Christa is running for House District 25 here in Forsyth County, and I'll let her introduce herself real quick for people who are following me who may not know her.
Hey everyone, I'm Christa and I'm running for House District 25, like Natalie said. So I'm her sister district, and I've got South Forsyth County and a little bit of northern parts of Johns Creek. So we are right next door to each other.
We are. And we are going to be talking about education today, something we're both really passionate about, which is why I wanted to have you on with me. So I guess first, let's talk about one of the reasons you're so passionate about education as a platform and an issue in the political sphere.
Yeah, so for me, it's all about my son and all of our children. So I have a 16-year-old, and we are very lucky. He grew up in the Forsyth County School District, so has had a great education. And I think that all of our children in Georgia should have those same opportunities. And these are our future leaders, our future teachers, doctors, lawyers, firefighters. You know, this is the future of our country. And they really need to have a good quality education. We need to fully fund our education, and we need to make sure our teachers are also taken care of as well, because they're the ones giving their time and effort to help our children achieve their goals and, work through school and achieve their dreams. So really, I started running for him on a platform of education, and climate change was my other one around our children. But yeah, it's to help set them up for success so that they have a better future, and making sure that all kids have the same opportunities, that same quality education that my son had opportunity to have here. How about you, Natalie?
Yeah, well, I have 4 daughters in the Forsyth County School District system, and I'm a product of public education myself, and I'm also just a big education proponent. I would be a professional student if there was a way for me to. I'm like Hermione in Harry Potter. I'm the one, always raising their, like, I love school. I loved school. And I would definitely go back to college if I could. So for me, it's, one, I have kids in the school, but also I believe in education, and I believe that education is a vital part of a functioning society. And it's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about it. And I feel that we underserve our educators and our students all the time when it comes to education. So there's a couple things that I'd like to talk about today. And the first one I want to talk about, something that you and I have discussed before, but I'd like to talk about collective bargaining with teachers and what it is, why it matters, and why it is important, and how it has affected education, especially here in Georgia, and things that have been happening. And this is just in general, but also something that really came out because of the pandemic. So what are your thoughts on collective bargaining and the state of it and how it?
Yeah, so I'm from Florida, and down there teachers have the opportunity for collective bargaining, and they have that opportunity to have that voice speak up for them. And I think you're absolutely right. With COVID, what we saw was that they didn't really have that voice to speak up for them when it came to being forced back in the schools, not being required to have a mask or have the kids in your classroom have a mask. And I think that had they had that opportunity, maybe they would have had more regulations or more, I guess, mask mandate for one thing, just things in place to keep our teachers, our students, and the staff healthy. So I think they need to be able to have that centralized voice. And I know we have organizations across the state that do help our teachers and try and have that centralized voice for them. But I know there's multiple organizations as well across the state of Georgia that kind of do that.
Absolutely. And so I think one thing that people don't understand about, collective bargaining is that it isn't just for teachers. It is partially for teachers, yes. And I think it's important to, so let's talk about the pandemic. There are a lot of teachers who resigned because they felt if they spoke up about their concerns, they would be fired. So they just resigned because they didn't feel that their needs were being met as an educator to have that thing. And because they don't have the ability to collectively bargain, there was no safe way for them to voice those concerns in environments that they felt were hostile towards their stances about what was happening. So that's important. But then we also, when you look at what teachers unions accomplish, it isn't just about the teachers, it's about education as a whole. So if you look at areas that have unions versus areas that don't, something that has happened over the past few years is they have states and the federal government have decided, okay, with property taxes dictating how much funding is going to education, they're sending more money to areas of the state that don't have as much funding. Now, what that should do is increase the school budget. They should the budget that they already had plus what's being sent. And in areas with teachers unions, you see that happen because as part of their negotiation, things like that, funding for things like that is part of what they've negotiated for the area. In areas without strong teachers unions, what you see is they get this money from the state, and instead of increasing their budget, they keep it the same and reduce property taxes for people. So this money is meant for schools to improve, and it doesn't happen because what they just do is they hand out a tax break. And to me, it's a misappropriation of funds. Like, to me, that's how are you not breaking the law by doing this? But you don't see that happen as often in area with strong teachers unions as you do in areas with no unions. And I think it's important to note that it's not that teachers in Georgia have decided not to have a union, it's that they are banned. They are not legally allowed to have one. And they're not legally allowed to strike. And that's not all public employees. Firefighters have a union. They are also not allowed to strike, but they have a union. So it's specifically teachers that have been singled out. And I think that that's a problem when, most teachers have to have a second job in order just to have a home and take care of themselves and their families. That to me is a problem. We're charging, especially when you look at how people were reacting about schools reopening in the middle of the pandemic. Like, we're like, well, I can't have them at home. They want teachers to be babysitters, educators, therapists, all of these things, but then they don't want to pay them.
Well, and I just spoke to a teacher last weekend who actually brought up that very thing, that they didn't get their increases this year because of everything going on. And that it's hard for her to support her family on the income she makes as a teacher because she has kids and, she's not making enough to support her family. Her exact words were, if I was a single mom, I would never be able to support my family on the pay that we receive today. And I know teachers that spend a lot of their money out of their own pocket to take care of their kids and take care of their classrooms to make sure that their kids get the quality that the teachers think they should have. And if they had that central voice, the union, to fight for them, they would be getting better pay and they would have those opportunities to bring their voices together to advocate for that.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons I think it's so important that we fight for our teachers. To me, education is two-pronged, but it's interconnected. It's two different areas that you can talk about, but they connect to each other. So one is better supporting our educators, and not just educators, but staff of schools as well, because they're just as important. And then also what we're giving our students. But in my opinion, the better we treat our educators, the better our students are going to be. And so those things, rising tide raises all boats, as they say. Go ahead.
And our teachers, I don't know how you feel. So our teachers teach because they love the job and they love the kids and they want to see our kids succeed, right? So if we give them the tools and resources, the impact that they can make in their lives, because if you raise the teachers, you raise the quality for our children as well. And I don't know about you, but I have specific teachers that I had during my lifetime that today something comes up and I'm like, Miss Roberts would have said this, or Mr. Roberts would have said that, or Mr. Messina told us about that, right? Like those lessons from our teachers stay with us for a lifetime and they become a part of us. They're so important to our lives, and we do need to lift them up and help our kids through them as well.
Absolutely. And the way that we're treating teachers, that we're underpaying them, that we aren't giving them the resources they need to succeed, that we are tying their hands so much when it comes to education by focusing so much on test scores and not focusing on actual education and learning. That's one of the reasons we have a teacher shortage. We do not have enough teachers. It's a crisis. We have a teacher shortage, and it is absolutely not because people don't have the passion for it. I would love to be a teacher personally.
I would love to be actually, yeah.
But I
would love to be a teacher too.
My family couldn't afford it.
No.
We would lose our home if I changed careers.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because it's not like I'm making six figures or anything, you know? So it's a massive problem when we are treating the people we are charging with educating our children so poorly. And I also think that it's important. Education to me should be important to everyone, even if you don't have kids in the system, because if you're a local business owner, the people you're going to hire are going to come locally, and the better educated they are, the better employees they're going to be. So you should care, you should want to contribute and improve the education of your area, because it serves your business better,
right?
If the education is better in your area.
It takes a village, right? Like it truly takes a village to make sure that the youngest of us are raised in that fashion that we would like to see them raised, with all of the opportunity, with all the education, with all the tools. And the village isn't just you and me as moms, or our teachers, or the staff, or the bus driver, or whoever, you know, that student comes in contact with. It's the whole community around you lifts up your education, lifts up your student. And it takes all of us to work together. And whether you have kids or not, the way we treat our kids betters our society overall. And so, everybody needs to be involved and engaged. And our kids' education should be like Monday Night Football, really, in my opinion. That's how excited we should be about it, and that's how the teachers, really should be treated. To me,
absolutely. So actually, with that and talking about that, I'd like to transition into what is referred to as school choice, and your opinions on that. And let's start off with I'll start off with, for people who don't know, school choice. It sounds good. It sounds like you get to choose the school that your kid goes to, and the school district has to give you the money that they would spend on your kid for you to take it to another school, like a private school. So basically, you might have heard of vouchers, of charter schools, things like that. So school choice involves being able to choose a school that you are not zoned to, that you are not districted to. And sometimes that comes in the form of a charter school within your school district, which is a public school. Sometimes it comes in the form of private charter schools or other types of religious private schools that you get a voucher to bring public funding to those private institutions. So that's what school choice is. So I'd love, I obviously have some opinions about it, in case that wasn't clear by my tone of voice, that whole explanation, but I would love to hear what you think about it.
So I really, I think, Natalie, we're probably on the same page with that, that we really need to have, we need to keep our public taxpayer money in our public schools. I think that when we pull that money out, it negatively impacts all of the children who are left in that school and in that district, because a lot more money gets pulled out than actually, when you scale the number of kids in a district, actually is used for that child. So you're impacting multiple times the kids that are in that school. And every child deserves to have the same quality education in Georgia. No matter where you live, no matter where you come from, what county you're in, every child should have that same opportunity. And when we pull that money out of the school, we are giving more opportunity to this child, and then we're leaving these other children behind, and these other teachers and this other staff, where instead of school choice, what we need to be doing is looking at how can we uplift the entire school, and how can we help every single child in that school, versus taking money and sending just these few over here, and then giving our money to private institutions, which I completely don't agree. I don't agree
Right.
with.
So one argument about taking that money out is it's the money that they've paid in taxes, and since they aren't utilizing the public school, they should then get to put it towards a private school. But I feel like we covered that before with, if you are a member of a society, you have to contribute to that society, even if you aren't utilizing every single benefit of that society. To me, like, if you have a problem paying taxes, that's not to say that all taxes are right and that we don't have to fix things and everything, because we do. There's many problems with how taxes are utilized and gathered and things like that. But if you don't think taxes should happen at all, then I invite you to go live in a mountain by yourself, because that's just not how being part of a society works. So I disagree with that, the argument that you're just taking money that is your money anyway and you're not utilizing it in the public schools, because it takes away, like, it costs the same amount. Like, they're factoring in, like, okay, well, we're spending this percentage on lighting, and it's not just that sort of thing, and that lighting still has to be paid for. The lights aren't going to be dimmer because your kid isn't there. So
Right.
you're negatively impacting a school district by doing that. Not to mention, private institutions do not have the same oversight as public institutions do.
Yeah.
So that's a problem for me, because especially when you get into religious, no public money should be going to religious institutions,
Right.
in my opinion, because if it's your choice, if you want to educate your child in that way, then that's fine, but public money should not be supporting that.
Right. It's a choice that you make for your child. Right.
Right. And
Mhm.
you have to pay for that. That's the choice that you are making. And not to mention, the majority of vouchers don't cover full tuition, especially for secular private schools. So it is a way for religious private schools to get more to get more people in, and I
Yeah.
have a problem with that. But also, if you look at in areas that have implemented school choice, one of the things that they've seen is actual learning education. What we were talking about before goes out of the way, because when you start talking about, let's say we're talking about public charter schools, the
Yeah.
focus becomes on testing. They need to prove that they're doing well, and so every school, then their sole focus is on testing and not on education, and the children suffer, especially special needs and underprivileged children, because the folks, children who come from more well-off families, they're getting that supplemental education at home,
Yeah.
and disadvantaged children and special education children are not getting that supplemental education. So all they're learning how to do is take tests, and that's not preparing them for higher levels of education, and it's not preparing them for being, for employment or for being out in the world. And so
Right.
that's another problem that I have with school choice, is that it doesn't actually improve anything.
No.
And also, I would argue that parents don't always make the best choices for their children.
Right.
If you are and also, parents don't have all the full information a lot of the time either.
Right.
They think they're making the best decision, but they don't
Right.
actually have all the information, and it ends up being negatively impacting in the long term.
Right.
Also, as I was talking about with special needs children, they are incredibly harmed by school choice programs, because private schools and charter schools do not have to accept special needs children and special education children. So they are then left in a school district that is floundering because of the loss of money, which
Yeah.
might close, which might they have to be shuttled to an entire new district, and it is incredibly disruptive. It takes up so much of their lives. They're losing all these things. And so to me, school choice it sounds good, but when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, it's a massive problem. And to me, if you support Forsyth County School District, which isn't to say Forsyth doesn't have its problems, because it does, but if you think from an education standpoint they're doing well, which we are ranked in the top 5 in the state, so we are doing pretty well, from those metrics. I don't see how you can support I'm not sure about your opponent, but my opponent believes in school choice. And so if you support Forsyth County Schools, you cannot support my opponent because
No.
she supports taking funding away from Forsyth County Schools.
Right.
She voted to cut $950 million from education in the middle of a pandemic. That's a huge problem to me.
Yep.
And, we're talking about funding, and yes, okay, state revenue was down, but they didn't talk about any ways they could make up that revenue in new ways. They didn't talk about, they were just like, nope. Oh, they were proud of it because it was only a 5% cut instead of a 10% cut like other sectors saw. It's a pandemic. These are our children. There should have been as minimal cuts as possible or none. And in my opinion, education needs more funding,
Yes.
and so let's talk about defunding education, because that's what they're doing. They are continuously defunding education. And if you have a problem with people who say defund the police, then you should have a problem with your politicians defunding education, because that is exactly what's happening. It's what happened in the Georgia State Legislature this past session when they defunded public education in Georgia by almost $1 billion. And that has a huge impact. The school districts were afraid they were going to have to furlough teachers. They had to rework all of their calendars, and that's not just because of the pandemic. That's because of the missing funding they had from the state. So I'd love to hear some of your ideas for how we can increase school funding, if you have any.
So yeah, I mean, and the first going exactly what you said, Natalie, the first thing that should have come up when we were working on our budget, had you and I been in the Dome at that time, is what revenue can we bring in? Where are our revenue opportunities to make up for that shortfall and give that money back to education? For example, the tobacco tax in Georgia is well under the national average, and that's a huge millions of dollars just from that you could bring in and filter to education, even healthcare. I mean, if you bring that money in from a revenue resource, you can give it back to the education system instead of just constantly cutting. And where are other opportunities for revenue? We're a state with a lot of natural resources. And I don't think revenue just has to be about tax increases. It can also be about improving the economy, bringing in jobs that are higher paying, that people can purchase more and pay more taxes when they purchase their homes, and that increases your school funding as well. So I think in addition to, say, the tobacco tax, or other options to close loopholes like the double deduction for people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. If we cut that out, that's money that we can put back into our budget and potentially give to schools. And then we need to look at the whole economy of Georgia, and not just from an education perspective, but if we're talking about our children, also, for example, a green economy would help them for their future, and also bring in revenue from a tax perspective, as we would increase jobs and high paying jobs within the communities. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that we have. We just need to start thinking about what we look like tomorrow instead of just thinking about today. And I think when we cut the budget for education, we were only thinking about right now. We were not even thinking about tomorrow or our kids or what happens next year or the year after that. And that's one of the shortfalls I see with our current leadership, that we need to start thinking about tomorrow, and we aren't doing that today.
Absolutely. And it's something that I mention all the time, something about politics, and it's just the way that politics is. And you're not a politician, I'm not a politician. We're both first-time candidates. We haven't worked in political arenas, before this. We just saw that we didn't like what was happening and wanted to, to make a difference. And so what happens with politics is so often the way that everything is, it's, where do you stand on this issue? Where do you stand on this issue? Where do you stand on this issue? And something that I've mentioned in almost all of my videos and interactions is that, yes, I have a stance on education, but it leads me into my stance on other things, because everything is interconnected. For example, one way that we could increase revenue in the state of Georgia is by legalizing cannabis. And that's a whole other topic that, is not, it's very tangential to education, but it's there in the sense that it is something that could help fund it. And also it reduces the budget for other, for other things that taxes fund. If you if you don't have to dedicate police officers and sheriffs to, hunting down and policing cannabis use, if you don't have to pay for prisoners to be jailed for cannabis, that's all budget that is no longer needed there and can be reallocated somewhere else. And that gets into, that's not just education funding, that gets into all different kinds of things about how we can better serve our things. So to me, every issue is interconnected. And so I love that you brought up the environment, because that's another issue that you and I are both very passionate about. And I think that, it's, there's a great saying that we don't inherit the earth from our grandparents, or from our parents. We are renting it, we're borrowing it from our children. And too many people, to me, don't think of it that way. No. And I try to not just think of the earth that way, but the economy that way as well. As a millennial, I have inherited a terrible economy from the generations before me, and I want things to be better. I hate the, like, well, this is the way it was, like I had metal slides and I had 8-year-old textbooks and stuff when I was a kid. Okay, that's bad. Shouldn't you want things to be better for other people? So for me, I want my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, or I want the generations after me to have it better than I had it. And so that's another reason that I'm fighting so hard for education, is because I think education is such a foundation for so many things, for active and engaged citizens. And I mean, we talk about economy, you talk about, people are like, oh, why don't more people, have entrepreneurship? Well, maybe if they had a better education, they would have the opportunities for that, but they're prevented from having those opportunities. So again, it's education tying into economy in a different way. You can push up the economy in the future by providing a better education now. So it's education is a, you wouldn't think it would be that hot button of a topic. You would think everyone would be on board with improving education, but it's just not the reality. And I still can't get over the representatives who cut $1 billion, defunded education by $1 billion in the middle of a pandemic, and are proud of that budget. And that, that really kills me. Something I'm going to do for people listening, because I know school choice is really confusing, and it sounds great. There's a couple of great articles that really dive into school choice from a couple of different perspectives. One is from the mother of a special needs student, and it really talks about the ways that further disenfranchises special needs students with school choice. It also talks about the testing aspect, things like, there's a couple of different articles. So I'm going to put those in the comments after we're done, so that people can see those. Christa, I'm also going to link to your website and to your Act Blue when in the comments when we're done talking, and I'll link to mine as well, because we can't touch on everything, obviously. And also, I'm not an expert. I'm a lot of my opinions are based on reading the experts, what they've said about it, and so I can talk about why I feel that way, but I can't go in as in depth as they can, and so I'd love to share their words with everyone. Is there anything else about education that you would like to share here?
No. I think this was a great conversation, Natalie. Thank you for inviting me. And I will say, the one thing you touched on about making the future better for our children, isn't that the basis of the American dream, right? That every generation has more opportunity and more ability for, a better life than the generation before. And that's really all I want. It's really the heart of what I want for our kids. So you said it perfectly.
What a great way. Exactly. The heart of the American dream. That's right. Yeah. And if you aren't working so that it's better and easier for this generation and the next generation and the next generation than it was for you, then you are, and you're actively working against the American dream by saying they have to have it as hard as you did. The whole point is for it to be easier and better. So that's what a fantastic correlation to make there, Christa. I love that. I really appreciate you coming on. So for folks who don't know why I called this a crossover event, one, because I'm a huge TV nerd who watches a lot of superhero shows, and whenever those shows cross over, it's a crossover event. So even like Grey's Anatomy has crossover events. But Christa does a gathering on Saturday mornings called Coffee with Christa, and you can find the event on her Facebook page for that. She would love to have you join and ask questions. Hers is a little bit more interactive than mine is. It's more of a meeting than it is me rambling at a camera for 15 minutes as it has been in the past. I was so nice to have someone to talk to today instead of me just talking to my to my reflection in the computer. But I want to thank everyone for coming. This is Tuesday Tea with Natalie. I am drinking decaf today because in case you couldn't tell, I had a lot of caffeine earlier. I do this every Tuesday at 4:30. You can send me topic ideas. You can leave questions in the chat or the comments, and I'm happy to answer them as they come up. I'm here for you guys, so I want to know what's going on. I want to know what you think about, and if there's a topic you'd love to hear me talk about, please share it with me, and I will plan a Tuesday Tea with Natalie around that. But thank you everybody who is watching right now and who's going to watch later. Christa, again, thank you so much for joining me. It was so nice to be able to have a conversation and to hear some additional ideas and put together some additional connections that I hadn't before. So that was great. Thank you.
Thank you too, Natalie.
All right, everybody, have a wonderful Tuesday, and I will see you next week. Same Nat time, same Nat channel.